Hello, both sides of the conversation family. We welcome you to this virtual space crafted especially for you. My name is Jada Curry, and I'm both sides of the conversation's marketing director and graphics design specialist. I want to take some time to ground us all as a community into this space we are about to open up in, so let's go through our community standards. Both sides of the conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation, so we ask that you all be respectful of that. We also ask that you be respectful of each panelist, host, and participant. We do encourage healthy debates and conversations. Don't personalize anything with anyone. This includes name-calling, bullying, trolling, or shaming. This will not be allowed or tolerated. Your perspective is yours. It is not a prescription. You do not have to agree, but show respect. These community standards apply to all of our live shows and any virtual spaces that we hold on social media, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We want to make sure that we are caring for each other as a community. This is our priority in all of our endeavors as both sides of the conversation. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's show and continue to stay in touch with us via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or all of them. All right, thank you for listening and see you soon.
Welcome to our segment, Mental Health in the Latinx and Black Community. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are gathered in this virtual space here every Sunday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I am Simone Davis, your co-host for both sides of the conversation. And now I would like to introduce you to our founder, our host, John Henry. Hey, John, not to interrupt, but we cannot hear anything that you are saying right now.
Oh, I had to drop the mic. There it goes. See, it's always something happening on this show. Twice. Okay.
You're very passionate.
All right. Now I got to start over. See, this happened to me twice. Too much stuff going on. Well, everybody, I'm John Henry, Executive Director of Both Sides of Conversation. Thank you all for joining today. Sorry, I had a mic moment. It's the second time this happened. Things happen. I wanted to say a couple of things to community. One, I wanted to thank everybody who came out yesterday with the City Eats. We was able to feed 1,300 families in need in the city. I want to thank Vibes and Smiles, Us for Us, and a host of other organizations that came out and helped prepare the meals and help distribute them out to the community. It was a phenomenal event. So just wanted to say thank everybody who came out and supported yesterday. It was very powerful. And to see all of our young people come together in solidarity with community to help out for those in need. And then it was May Day to all of our union workers and to all the workers who came out in March in solidarity, talking about workers' rights, some of the things that is impacting our workers. Just want to say thank you. It was a nice event. I seen a lot of the locals out, seen a couple of our supervisors out in the community, marching up and down Market Street. And, this work is just going to continue as we continue the solidarity. So thank everybody that came out to those events. And I know there was also some peaceful protests for May Day that happened as well. So just want to thank all the people that was a part of it. Thanks to the young people and the commitment. There was a number of events that I was a part of this weekend. So I want to say thank you to all of those people who came out in support. And then also I want to say a special thank you to the class of 2021, to 100% College Prep. Diane Gray and Mr. Shell over there and the team had a phenomenal college signing day. I was just happy to be a part of the event. Some of those young people I worked with, to mentor, and just to see all of them getting ready to go off to college and their endeavors and what they're going to do was just phenomenal. 40 young people coming out of District 10, going to college, choosing the colleges that they prefer to go to, that they've been accepted. Over $500,000, I believe, in scholarship money that they was awarded. So just want to say phenomenal job that 100% College Prep is doing with our young people. Nice to see all of them out there. It was a phenomenal event. And then the last event we had, I can't think now, it's going on my mind because of all of this, but it was another event that I went to, and I just want to thank all those young people that was out there. So much going on in my head, but the young people definitely been showing up doing the things that we do. And every time we get a chance to highlight our young people in the community for the things that they're doing positively to impact the community, here at both sides of the conversation, we definitely will be highlighting them. And then I just want to say thank you to all the people who's been calling, checking on me. I did take my first COVID vaccination shot. I'm still feeling under the weather. I'm not 100% yet, but I was able to get out and push through. But definitely there are some side effects that really take place when taking this vaccination. I hope we all mindful for all our caretakers and for people that are taking care of some of our seniors and elders in the community. Please be aware when they get these vaccination shots, there is going to be some downtime and there is some side effects that does affect you when taking that vaccination. But we have to do it. We have to get it. But just understand that there is some side effects that we have to be aware of. And then another thing I just want to say to community, this weekend was another violent weekend. We had a lot of shootings here in the Bay Area. And also we had another shooting that killed a couple of people in Wisconsin. And that's why this conversation today is going to be so important for community. When we're talking about mental health, there's a lot of things going on as we transition out of this pandemic. A lot of people are dealing with anxiety and being back around people. And there's going to be a lot of things that's going to affect not only our young people, but our elders in the community. And that's why this conversation is important, trying to find out how do we get the services, how do we get the mental health specialists in our community to help impact and combat some of this that we're seeing that's going on. So with that being said, everybody be safe out there. Looking forward to this conversation today. I apologize for having my mic muted. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and I missed that. So thank you, Simone, for jumping in there and catching me. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Simone, and we're going to start introducing today's guests. And I know we have two other guests that'll be rolling in a little late because prior engagements, but we're going to go ahead and start this conversation. Go ahead, Ms. Simone.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to introduce our first presenter, and his name is Marak Salazar. Marak Salazar is the Chief Executive Officer of Mental Health Association of San Francisco.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you so much, Mark. And the next presenter that I would like to introduce is Sabrina Mahoney. She is a trainer. She is Training Institute Manager at Mental Health Association of San Francisco.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, like Simone said, my name is Sabrina. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as a trainer at the Training Institute of the Mental Health Association of San Francisco, and really excited to be in conversation with folks. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter is Peter Murphy. He is an outreach manager, Mental Health Association of San Francisco.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this important conversation. Thanks, John. Thanks, Simone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And our next presenter, we have C.W. Johnson. He is an outreach and peer counselor at Mental Health Association of San Francisco.
Hello, just so grateful to be here and really look forward to having this conversation. Thank you a lot for having us on.
Thank you. And then our last presenter is going to be Duwane Swann, founder of the GEM Mental Health Family Support Foundation. And that is GEM, J-E-M, Mental Health Family Support Foundation.
Yes, and he'll be coming in shortly. I know he's in another event, but we'll go ahead and kick off this conversation to community that's joining us today. If you're on our YouTube, if you use the live chat function, if you have questions or comments that you want to make for any of the panelists, please leave your comments in the live chat on YouTube, and we'll get them up here and we'll get those questions answered. So with that being said, you guys know that's been watching us. There's 4 things we try to get out of our conversations on Sunday: the education component, the issues component, how to fix it, and the resources. So we have some phenomenal presenters today, and I'm hoping we can really hone in and figure out what these issues are. And I know sometimes we have our elected officials jumping in and some of our people who need to hear these conversations as we start making a legislative change and things of that nature. This is the conversation where we get that information from the people that's doing the work. So with that being said, Simone, if you want to go ahead and ask the first question, and then we'll just start jumping into the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So the first question that I have today is, how can we change the narrative of mental health in the Black and Latinx community?
All right, I'll jump in first. So I think the key component is actually just normalizing the conversation, right? A lot of these communities have a bunch of stigma attached to mental health, and so like in the Latinx community, there's the idea of machismo, where you don't want to seek mental health services because it shows weakness of who you are as a person, mentally, physically, and all that stuff. Same with the Black and African American community. It's mental health is again, as an Asian myself, same thing. It's this stigma that we have about mental health, and so as we to change the narrative, we must just start talking about it. Just every conversation we need to tie mental health in. My background is in population health, and so everything I do and everything I understand is that mental health is part of everyday life. Everything you do is affected by mental health. Everything else is, like I think one example is when you're stressed about paying rent or whatever it is, you can't choose mental health. You pay rent, you pay for food, and all those stressors. It's hard to struggle in a day-to-day life, and so that's part of your mental health as well. So I think just talking about the stigma about it and kind of really integrating mental health as part of who we are as a whole person. So I think that's a place that we can start when we try to change the narrative and normalize mental health as a community.
That's true. Anybody else? Go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I think timing is everything. I feel like this is the time to really push having that conversation. Because if you think about it, this pandemic has given what we call, what people would like to call normal people anxiety. And so now they're feeling a little bit of anxiety. Maybe they can understand a little bit of what we go through. So this is really probably one of those times when we can start having conversations and we can get a lot more understanding than we normally would. So I definitely think timing, this is the time to have those conversations because everyone is feeling something. So yeah, that's my opinion on it. I'm through talking.
Yeah, also, and just echoing what Mark and CW were saying, I think also when we talk about having conversations, I think sometimes that can feel like a really vulnerable place, and it's hard to figure out what that looks like in real time. And so, one thing I've really admired, even about our agency, we focus on peer-related mental health services. So, less of the separation between, oh, you're the one with the problem and I'm the one helping you, more of an understanding that we all have experiences with mental health. And so when we frame those conversations, framing it in a way where I can disclose like real challenges that are going on in my life, and when I'm at work or with friends, with family, like being able to have conversations that start with like, how are you really doing? Like, what have been some of the triumphs that you've gone through? What are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? And if we can bring those conversations into a space where we can normalize them and not have a separation between, oh, there are those types of folks who have challenges, but, in our communities, we don't have these types of challenges. I think that's a way that we can start bridging that and really integrating the conversations into our everyday, both our work life, our family life, and that can be kind of maybe more of a real example of how we can normalize those conversations. That's it.
Phenomenal. Peter, you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'll just briefly add that I feel like this idea of peer recovery that Sabrina brought up is really, really important, with the idea that that we support each other. And I feel like in the communities, the Latinx and Black communities, it's really about getting the conversation started. I feel like in a lot of ways, and making that space available. And there's a lot of different ways I think that can happen. I think this show is a great example of it, and I hope that folks that are able to tune in will feel that way. And it needs to be just a conversation that's just a lot more comfortable and sort of. I think I saw somebody in the chat wrote about being normalized, so that folks, so that it's just not that unusual. I mean, I grew up also, in a situation where mental health stuff, we just didn't talk about it, and it was sort of like, all right, just get it together, and be a man, and all this kind of stuff, and I needed help, and it took me a long time to admit that. So thanks again, thanks John and Simone, thanks for having us.
No, thank you. I think that was phenomenal feedback from everybody. As you guys see, the questions that start coming through the screen. We have one question up there, but I want to jump into that stigma part because I think that's very important, and we have to kind of hone into it because the stigma really holds back that gap to start the conversations. And then because legislatively, when people seek mental health, the impact that it has on them, far as gun owners and different situations, if they have an issue, a lot of times they won't come forward because of the penalties of coming to seek help, right? Prescriptions or different things can impact sometimes people's civil liberties. And I want to ask you all, how do we get around that? Because I know a lot of people that's like, hey, I'm stressed or I'm going through something, but I don't want to come forward and talk about it because I'm a gun owner. And if I talk about I'm being depressed, then that's going to affect my ability to carry a firearm, right? But then that's also hurting the community because now we have people in the community who are walking around and dealing with issues that really face us. So how do we get around that? Or is there a way around it?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to talk about the stigma about guns and people with mental health issues or mental health challenges. Statistically, people who have mental health issues or diagnosable mental health issues, they have a lower statistical chance of violence. They're more likely to be perpetuated against them as a person who has mental health issues. So I just want to kind of point that out first, that stigma and gun violence and people with mental health issues are the most violent people, even if they have guns. So yes, there are occasions when someone may have a firearm and die by suicide, but at the same time, that is unlikely the case. So people should be aware of that as well. And as part of the conversation, when they want to go around that, I mean, when people talk about it, they shouldn't be afraid. I think that's what the community is kind of really afraid of. Like a lot of people, it's that the ramifications of mental health can really devastate one's life, and so that's something we're working on at a system-wide level. And I think that's to what everyone's saying, is that the normalization of the conversation of mental health and making it a part of like our actual physical health, I think is a way to help kind of reduce that challenge of that fear. Because when you say I have a disability and I can't be in a wheelchair, nobody bats an eye if you had a gun. So why should we make a different standard for mental health? So that's kind of the perspective I have.
Yeah, I just got to say, this is CW again. I just got to say, I've never walked into a therapist's office and somebody said, "Do you have a gun? Can I take it?" So uh, I think that might be a little bit much on the spectrum of worrying about, they're going to take my gun just because I see a therapist. That's not the way it works. So I think having that, like I said, normal conversation and making it normal to go and seek help, knowing that those things are more or less likely to happen. Like I said, I've never been to a therapist and the police came in and say, "We want your gun." So not very realistic, but I do understand the concern.
Okay, anybody else want to jump on that? I think that's a good point. I'm glad you said that because that is removing some of the myths and some of the stigmas people don't know. And that's part of the education piece, making sure people really understand that there is a safe place to get help. And I'm glad you pointed that out, CW. That's very, very important for the community to hear. Sabrina or Peter, if you want to jump in on that, or
well, I think that well, we actually have a speakers bureau program. It's called Solve, and that's sharing our lives, voices, and experiences. And those are speakers who go into the community with the goal of destigmatizing mental health. And it's really, you know, it's about hearts and minds, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, it's really like one person, almost one person at a time on some level. But you know, we're trying to reach people when they're ready to hear the news. You know, to hear that there is a solution around mental health. I think for a lot of us, I mean, like I was alluding to before, I mean, I spent years and years thinking I didn't need help, and we're just trying to find ways to destigmatizing mental health is huge. It's just an ongoing effort on our parts as well as other agencies throughout the city, and we work together on it. And that speakers bureau, I mean, we go out into the community, we go to schools, we go to community groups, and it's just a safe place to again to learn about mental health. And we're going to be we also have some of these discussions. We have a series called Real Talk that CW has been the host for, and Sabrina is actually working on it very readily right now. And that's twice a month. The next Real Talk is this Friday at 5 o'clock, and it's going to be about Asian American Pacific Islander mental health and stigma. And then the 21st, it's going to be about mental health stigma and the Black African American community. You know, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, which is one reason that we all wanted to get on here with John and Simone to kind of to highlight that. And again, it's an ongoing effort, and it's not gonna there's no like end point. I think it's just we're trying to make progress, you know, as fast as we can, as well as we can. But it's an ongoing kind of struggle. So thanks.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. It is Mental Health Month. Awareness Month is also AAPI month. So we just want to highlight our Asian Pacific Islander community as well. And I know we have Cinco de Mayo and different things in our Latin community that's going on this month as well. So just want to highlight that too. Don't want to forget about them and let them know that we understand and we support you. But yes, mental health is important. That's why we kick this month off with having this conversation, because we know mental health in the Black and Brown community is impacted heavily, and we have to figure out what's going on and how do we fix it. I'm a firm believer on this show. I've told it many, many times to people. Mental health in America is just as bad as this pandemic. And if we don't put the amount of money and people into it like we did this pandemic, it's going to only get worse, especially coming out of this pandemic. And I just want everybody to understand this mental health thing is affecting us all across the board, our young kids to the elders in the community. And we have to tackle it. And we have to have just as much focus that we had on this pandemic on mental health. And I hope conversations like this begin to open up the door and get some of our elected officials, some of our departments to really start honing in on how do we fix this? How do we make it cool? And I've been asking this over the months and months on this show. How do we make mental health cool? It's going to take a community to do it. It's going to take both sides of the conversation. It's going to take our influencers. It's going to take our hip hop culture. It's going to take some of our artists. We're going to need everyone to talk about it. We have to keep these conversations going, and we will here. But I know that's a part of it. But Sabrina, did you want to jump in at the end because I cut you off there? Go ahead.
No, I always appreciate the conversation around how do we make things cool, how do we make things accessible. I think that integrates things into the community. And I mean, as I was thinking, even when we talk about mental health, I think we always equate that with poor mental health. So when I say like we need to talk about mental health, I think there's a lot of people who are listening to that and thinking of, oh, a mental illness, a mental health challenge. So sometimes even when we have conversations around mental health, what I noticed most is that it's always associated with bad mental health. But mental health is a continuum. It is like if we make the comparison to physical health, we can understand that you can have bad physical health and you can also have good physical health. You can be healthy. So I think when we have these conversations around mental health, I think it's also really important to talk about how our mental health is a spectrum. And there is also experiences of people having really great coping skills, with being really resilient. And I think we see so much resilience and we see so much coping going on in our community. And if we're able to have conversations around both of those things, I think we can also we can have more productive conversations, because we're not always going to be focusing on the negative. We're not always going to be focusing on what needs to change, but we can also have a parallel discussion around what is changing and what folks are already doing in their communities. What practices did we learn from our ancestors? What community practices do we have that encourage support organically already? If we could have those parallel discussions, I think we'll just be setting ourselves up to both address disparities and also celebrate our healing and celebrate our resilience at the same time. So that was just something that came to mind as I was thinking.
So we had a question that came up, and she's asking, can you talk about mental health in Medicare and Medicaid? Is there a need to change the language of reporting? Now, I'm not sure about the language reporting part, but I know I did speak with you all behind the scenes when we was talking about some of the services, and I think CW did a good job of kind of explaining, because I received some calls from community, and one of the things that I didn't know, I wasn't aware, and CW kind of cleared it up, but I was told from community that when a family member or a young person was shot, they wasn't able to get mental health services through the Medi-Cal, or they wasn't able to get some kind of PTSD therapy. And I was trying to figure out why. I didn't understand it. But how much of that we need to really focus in on as well when it comes to Medicaid, Medicare, and these conversations we're talking about today, the community that we reach out to the most is some of the communities that impacted socially and economically. And again, how do we get the services to community when they don't have the financial support? And then we have these agencies or these insurances that really don't provide it. How do we get there, and how do we fix that?
I can come in from a systematic standpoint. So there's a study by the Kaiser Family Foundation that there is a shortage of professionals in the mental health field. So over the next 10 years, we're going to see a gap in people seeking. I mean, we see a huge gap right now, but we'll see that gap even expand even more. And so that's one of the challenges of not being able to get services. So there's so much demand for it, especially, like unfortunately I'm pointing this out, the low income or post-traumatic stuff. When an event occurs, it's really hard to get access to services unless it's coming from a private place, because then they can really just shift their focus. But when you're getting services from from the public sector, it's really difficult because there's such a long wait list. There's a shortage of volunteer services for the community to access because there's so much demand for it. So that's from a systematic standpoint. And I think what we can do there is encourage people to get into mental health as a professional opportunity. And if we can address those issues, we can support people in that field. I think more access to Medi-Cal services as well as Medicare services is going to improve in the future. I mean, one of the things we're pushing in terms of creating more providers or professionals is the peer support work. So professionalizing peer-to-peer work, peer-to-peer support groups, those individuals who are highly trained, get some sense of counseling training and peer support training, I think can be a valuable resource for the rest of the community, because peers really do understand, what Sabrina was saying earlier. They can really connect and relate, as well as Peter can connect and relate to individuals in the community. So that's one thing I think that we need to, as a system, focus on, is kind of really encouraging people to get into the mental health field, expanding what constitute as Medi-Cal available services or billable services as well.
So one quick question, Mark, I have, because I hear you about the people getting the services. There's a large amount of college students. I was reading the statistic, and they were saying that that's um, sociology, psychiatry, and it was one other field. It was like one of the highest sought after degrees in college. So if a lot of people are going in this field and we're still having a shortage, how much of it is pay? How much of it is burnout? And again, if we're going to, this is just for me saying that mental health is just as bad as the pandemic. How do we get our governors? How do we get our mayors? How do we get our elected officials to have the same emphasis to put executive orders in like they did in the pandemic? So for people that's not familiar, when we had the pandemic and California was hit the highest, Governor Newsom signed an executive order to make sure that the bar was dropped lower for more nurses to get into nursing school and get out. Is that the type of approach we need to have when it comes to mental health? Because it seems like from the people that I've talked to on our show about mental health, you really don't start making the money until you get more into the master's or the PhD level, right? But then that's a small group of people that go that far. And a lot of times the people who have the talent and skills because of the pay gap differ off into other industries, right? And we're talking about getting the culturally appropriate people in there. How much of that we need to look into far as the pay, and then making legislatively changes that can impact these people at the bachelor's level, at the AA level, to start getting them into the industry where they can start making money.
Oh, that's a great question, John. Yeah, it's difficult, right? Not everyone has access to wealth to go into higher education. And so one of the things we're pushing is that if we can provide preventative services like peer support, and that's a way I think we can actually address some of those issues. Well, we currently, I think the past legislative session, they passed SB 803, which is peer certification. That'll take effect in 2 years, but that allows billable services and people who have training, and they don't necessarily have to have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a PhD, but if they go through a extensive training that's approved by the state, then they can provide mental health peer support and services. And to your point, though, it is true in terms of pay. It's not the most illustrious job out there. It doesn't pay you as well as many other careers, and so it's always a career of love and wanting to help others, and that's and that can be that's not always reciprocated in terms of someone's pay. And so that, to your point, Dan, that is true to a degree. We need to kind of buffer the economic support for people who want to get in this field.
Definitely, I agree with you. But I mean, these are the great conversations to have when we're talking about reparations. We're talking about all the things that's changing in this country. We need to really look at this as taxpayers. We pay taxes, and we got to hold our legislative people accountable. And our teachers, I hear so much from our teachers and our educators. They are being impacted. They can't even work in San Francisco because they can't afford to live here. We have mental health providers. So as a country, we have to start this change. And again, we dump trillions and trillions of dollars into this pandemic. And we have to keep that same energy when we know in America, mental health is one of the highest issues that we're faced with every day in our communities. And I just want to help that conversation start shifting our lawmakers and some of the people in the community. We have to start looking at changing the pay and making sure that we get the right and qualified people in those positions. So definitely we'll keep pushing here on this side. Peter, I see you got your hand up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add real quick to kind of follow up with what Mark was saying. So we're all about peer recovery and also finding ways for peers to enter the workforce and get paid for their services. Mark mentioned SB 803, which is peer certification, which is going to help a lot of folks that qualify as peers and to have employment. So like the warm line, I put a little information about the warm line in the chat box. Our warm line is staffed 100% by people that identify as peers, meaning these are people that have mental health challenges that they've had some success, they've made some recovery around, and then they're using that to support the callers, to support the people calling in. A lot of our counselors, they're kind of on the journey of this is maybe like an entry kind of job where it's like, I think I might want to be a counselor. Maybe I want to be a therapist, but I'm not really sure. So I'll work on the warm line for a little bit and see what that's like. Meanwhile, I mean, the warm line's been busier than ever since the start of the pandemic, as you might imagine. We serve the whole state. And we've hired, we started out a year ago. I think we had, 30, 40 employees. Now we have around 120. And I'd say 70 of them are warm line counselors. And it's all remote. We don't have the office space for 70 warm line counselors, but it's a great opportunity. And it's a start. I think it's a start for people to get a job related to mental health. It's also, the warm line is a great place for somebody to call in and kind of get their feet wet, around, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I need even, but like Sabrina said, I mean, everybody's got mental health, we're like sort of on a spectrum, right? We're like, some days maybe I'm doing really well and other days I'm not. And these days, I think most of us, it's just been so challenging. But anyway, I mean, we're there's a crisis, I think, around mental health employees, like we're saying as well, to meet this demand. And the peer workforce is a big part of what we do. Trying to like normalize that, I mean, a lot of the clinicians, the folks with, PhDs and MDs and stuff, they don't really see the value of peer support. And we're not saying we're a substitute, but we can be a complement, and I think a very effective complement. I mean, I can speak from my own like lived experience how helpful it's been. So that's a great question. Thanks, John.
Wow, phenomenal. That's good information to know. Sabrina or CW, did you want to jump in? I see you step up.
Yeah, I can CW again. Yeah, I think one of the things when you talk about the question, we really have to make sure that the people are getting paid. Like case managers, people out there every day. We really have to put pressure on City Hall to say, hey, if these people are willing to come over here and work, they should be able to afford to live here. So we need to go ahead and pay them what they are worth instead of lowballing them and then wondering why they're not staying in the job. That's very hectic. It can be very hectic. It can be very hard, but it can also be very rewarding. Another thing too, we need to put pressure on our government to make sure that things like Medi-Cal and Medicare, there needs to be more money in that, and also needs to be more enforcement as far as these people getting paid. They need to get paid, so they shouldn't have to wait a year to get the money for the services they did 6 months ago. So all those things, you got to touch your governor, you got to write them, you got to let them know, you got to share your stories with them, and you got to follow when these things come up, because a lot of times things do come up that we need to vote on that we don't realize. So keeping aware of what's coming out of City Hall, what's coming out of Washington, really making an impact to know what's going on and demanding the right to that. People in this position need to get paid. Medicare definitely needs to be funded even more than so, and follow up. We need to follow up. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Emails, internet connections, whatever it takes to demand that the people, our peers, our family, and our friends get the emotional support and financial help they need. So it's really about putting the pressure on them to let them know this will not stand. We need mental health and we need it funded right now. And that's what we discuss at our POC group. We have a people of color group that we have every Monday at 10:30. And that's what we talk about. We talk about how can we politically change the landfill of mental health, and how can we get more money, more funds, and more people to have a real conversation around mental health. So that's that. I'm done for now. So that's me.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm definitely here at both sides of the conversation. This legislative season for the local elections, we're going to do our part. What we found last year, there's a big gap in our communities when it comes to the politics and the policies and understanding all of these bills. So we have some phenomenal people that's going to come on and really help educate community why it's important to get in these local and not just the national elections, because it is a big part of the change that needs to happen. But again, we're going to definitely continue to fight and advocate and bring awareness to our elected officials as well, especially when it comes to these tax breaks to these corporations coming into the city, especially and across the Bay Area. We give a lot of tax breaks to these large tech companies, and we have to really find a better way to leverage them with these tax breaks. And I think mental health and education is two areas that we really could focus on to make sure that these companies that are getting these major, massive tax breaks, I mean, and you're talking billions of dollars in tax breaks across the Bay Area, how do we really incentivize them to do a little bit more in the sector of mental health and education? And those are continued conversation that we're going to keep pushing here, because I think some of these tech corporations and some of these larger corporations have the due diligence that they need to do a little bit more when it comes. Like I said, I was out this weekend in the community. I'm talking to the people that's out there on the streets, and the two things that people are talking about is mental health and homeless and housing, two of the big conversations. And they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, you're talking about if you don't have housing, how much is your mental health affected, right? We already in the pandemic. So definitely we're going to keep those conversations going. But I think, yes, definitely when it comes to this political realm, we have to do a better job this season to really educate community and get the right people who understand these bills, and making sure that people in the community are educated and know which way when they're going out to vote, to make sure that they get the most for the community. But the equity pay is a big thing. This conversation of equity all across the board, it always comes back. There's some equity gaps. And, this inclusion part, having a seat at the table to talk about that without having to feel the ramifications of speaking up is something that we definitely going to keep honing in and working with community and solidarity to make sure that these pushes happen. So great stuff there, CW. Sabrina, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, and I was thinking about like some of what these barriers are. Also, especially earlier we were talking about like providers, or like providers being from a diverse background. I also want to acknowledge that like just putting people in institutions and systems without giving them support, especially when they are like racist systems, that doesn't necessarily help. Like, I'm a Black woman. I grew like, I went to undergrad, I studied psychology, but I didn't have an educational environment that was ready to support me, that looked like me, that reflected my beliefs and my values, for a lot of different reasons. So I think when we have a conversation around representation, we always want to also be thinking about just putting people in rooms, putting people in spaces without providing them that additional support that they need, kind of sets folks up from diverse, marginalized backgrounds to fail. So when we think about what type of mental health support we even want, I think that's why peer support is really, really a great example of a diverse and representational space. Because, and I think we've touched on it a lot, but as someone who's learned about peer mental support later in life, I feel like it's really important just to emphasize what it is. So it's the idea that like, I'm a person with lived experience of mental health challenges, and it's not that I have to tuck that away to receive or to like go into the workforce. It's that my lived experience with my mental health challenges is what makes me a valuable part of the workforce. So when I go into my space, working at my agency, I don't have to avoid my conversations around my mental health challenges. My experiences of them are what makes me a valuable trainer. And so when we think about putting people into the mental health field, especially people from diverse backgrounds, are those agencies set up so that they can have mental health services that are diverse and representational? It's not just talk therapy. Like, that is one example. Like, therapists are only one example of what mental health services can look like. So having a diverse threshold of different types of services, like in your community, is like a healing circle, is prayer a really big like rehabilitative space, is art therapy. Like, there are different ways that we can envision what healing looks like. And if we use the sort of practices that are a part of our community to form our healing, to form the agencies, and to form the practices that we are expected to kind of uphold within those agencies, I think we're going to be better equipped to sort of house a diverse workforce, as opposed to being like, oh yeah, we just want to throw more people of color into this clinician space, but the clinician space is not ready to support them as like and give them the additional like help that they need to really survive and thrive. I feel like I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but I had like two threads in my head and I was trying to weave them together. But you know what I mean? Like, we want to make sure that the space is set up for people to succeed, not just that we're throwing people into spaces that are not like the most healing spaces in general.
Now, I think that's very important, and that's why this is a conversation. It's going to go a little wide and left, but I think that's important because we have to be intentional when we're setting this up. A lot of times, we get caught into the data and the numbers, and trying to figure out how to make the numbers look good, but we're not really impactful in the work, what needs to be done. Simone, did you want to jump in there and ask the question? I know there's a couple questions coming in the chats, but if you want to jump in there and ask something, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Sabrina, I love the fact that you touched on healing. I think oftentimes enough when it does come to mental health awareness, we sometimes overlook the trauma that is passed down through a mother to her unborn child. So I wanted to touch on that subject. We focus on the individual, but are there any services that can help a mother to relieve that stress so she's not passing it down to her unborn child? Because, these kids are being born with ADHD, having behavioral problems, but all that is the center of the womb. So how can we talk about the health aspect and the healing prospect when it comes to a mother that's bearing that trauma in her womb?
So just chiming in, I have zero expertise as a male. But we do, in the past, we used to have a group, specifically to your point, Simone, about, mothers or mothers to be and their mental health. And so we used to have that group. There are certain groups in the city. We'd have to find that information, though, but there is space for mothers in San Francisco to really talk about it and get the support they need, to talk about, various things, including generational trauma. Or your own personal trauma, and kind of pushing that forward to your children. So there is groups, and we'll look for them and we'll send them out to you folks. But there is space for that. There is treatments for that. There's specific treatment for postpartum disorder as well. So I just wanted to kind of give that before anything else.
Yeah, definitely. And before Sabrina, go ahead and speak. Yeah, any digital flyers that you guys have of events or a way the public can get involved, please submit it to us, and we'll blast them on our social media handle. Especially for the community events, I think it's very important and we're part of getting that information so that people get the resources and help. So, Sabrina, you want to jump in here with Simone's comments?
Yeah, I was like, as the woman of the group, I am not a mother and I don't have experience with pregnancy, but I can say that Sister Web is a doula network that I know of that is doing a lot of work around birthing justice. And I will say that reproductive justice is an incredibly important part around mental health for expectant mothers or for any person who is pregnant. And I think that I think reproductive justice has a lot around mental health support for people who are pregnant. I know Sister Web, that's the one that I know of, but I can look up, some other resources around providing services specifically for people who are bearing children. I wish I had more.
No, absolutely. And I would be appreciative if you guys could provide that information. And I think that's something that needs to be within our community. We do have a multitude of different services for adults, but we don't really think about the trauma that's being, established in the womb. So that's why I asked that question, because that is a very hot topic. I'm a mother of 4 children, a single mom at that. So it can become a very stressful situation. Now, have I learned how to cope? Yes. But there are other mothers that are seeking, how I know, because I have other mother friends. So they're wanting information like, how do I cope? How do we eliminate that stress so that I'm not passing it on to my baby, So that's why I asked that question, because that's a topic that's not often touched, but definitely needs to be touched because we do generate that trauma in our womb.
And I just put a question up there. If anybody want to continue answering the question Simone had, or you can answer the one of the questions was, why is the services so short term? So I guess there's some mental health services in the community, but they're short term care. So I think people start getting into the work, the tools that they need, and then either it's the Medicare or Medicaid or the services in. How do we give sustainable care to the community?
Yeah. So just on the why services are so short, they really depend on where you're getting access to services and what type of services. So for the city of San Francisco, some of the social workers and therapists and all that, they have a very specific purpose. It's usually 30 to 90 days for short-term services. And then if it still persists or they feel like you can use more services, they do transfer you over to long-term services. So it will really depend on where you're getting services. So that's kind of partly the answer as well. And then the other question, the other response is that if you have, a lot of people don't have access to services post services funded by public health. So if you have, if you're a person who has access to some monetary resources, you can continue your services privately, or if you have some form of insurance through your employer, you can continue your services maybe on a monthly basis or weekly basis for a longer term period. But if you don't have access, which a lot of people don't have to access to that monetary resource, you are really extremely limited in what type of services and how often you can get them for yourself or a family member.
Wow, great information. Yeah. You guys see up on the screen about the POC support groups every Monday, 10:30 a.m. Our guy CW is the host, so there's some more services. I'll be putting up the other services as we continue this conversation.
Also, I think a lot of times it's really about about the way it's set up, the funding set up. Like you can only have 10 people that you can service in a short time. So sometimes that funding only allows you to see so many people. So the more funding that a place gets, the more people can be seen. But you don't really know that behind the scenes. You have to be behind the scenes, like with the board of directors or with the people running the agency, because they're only set up for so many people that allowed so many time. So that's stuff that you won't necessarily know unless you really looked into it. So that's why I really encourage people to join boards, to join these places and find out what's going on and try to see if you can shake things up from the inside. So when people come and say, "Hey, would you like to join our board?" I think you really need to think about real seriously looking into the company and really think about joining a board to find out how things work. So I think that's one of the ways that we can start to understand this process of why times are short or why times are longer, and that's the way we can kind of get things changed is from the inside out. So that's just what I think. I'm done.
Well, I think that's great information. And then, I want to ask you all this because I know mental health, when people hear it does give people these negative thoughts. But changing the names of how we present mental health, I hear people using wellness centers, different things. Does that really have an effect? Because sometimes I feel like mental health, whether you call it wellness, we have to find something, but we have to get the people in the community to do the work. And I talked to a couple of some organizational leaders last week, and one of the things that they told me that I wasn't aware of, but they said, John, there are wellness hubs at a lot of the San Francisco Hope sites around of our housing developments, but one of the problems was they don't have the staffing. So they talked about the biggest thing is capacity building and getting the staff, because they have one group of staff going to 11 different sites. And it's really impacting the community because they can't work there in that one community. They're moving around the city. And that goes back to money. And like you said, Brother Johnson, advocacy and getting the community involved, because a lot of times communities always asking, how do we help fix? And like you said, getting on these boards and really having your voice heard and dictating where the funding is going and how is it laid out. But I also think that there's a shift that needs to happen when it comes to the language and for these nonprofits and these RFQs and things of that nature and these proposals for the community. I think it's time to have a real change. and I don't think they touched on it as much because I've seen some of the stuff come out, and it seems to be a lot of funding, but I know it's not enough money, but there's a lot going in there. But how do we get those services to the community? CW, you want to go ahead, jump in there?
No, I just wanted to say that you said something. We actually host a training about language matters, and the way that you present something, the way that you say something, it really does matter. It really does change the narrative. And so, reach out to Peter, reach out to Sabrina. We actually do a training on language matters, how to change the conversation, how to make mental health a normal conversation. So, definitely get in contact with us and let us know, because we do really believe the way that we speak and how we talk about the conversation of mental health does impact and make a difference. So I just thought I would let you know about that we actually do a language matters training. I'm done, and thank you.
All right, before Sabrina.
So how do we get that here on both sides of the conversation? So now you're crawling up my ladder now, right? And every Thursday we have an educational Thursday presentation that we do, and that's something that I would like. See, this is what our community needs, right? And I've been reaching out to different people with different backgrounds, and I'm telling them the importance of coming on, doing a PowerPoint presentation, and having something there digitally that people could go back at their own leisure, because it's something you're going to say, and somebody will say, oh, you know what? Let me go back and look at that video because I know they talked about it. And I want to encourage all you here today. Definitely, if you have a PowerPoint presentation, I would love to have you all sign up to get on our Educational Thursdays and do a presentation, because again, that Educational Thursday is what it's all about, getting information to the community. But that's a great thing, CW.
That was before Peter and Sabrina chime in with language matters. They have way more detail about it, and they can kind of explain it. I do want to make a plug for people who are interested in joining the board. The Mental Health Association of San Francisco is looking for board members, specifically from the BIPOC community. So please go sign up, mentalhealthsf.org. I do need you more. I need more board members that represent the community. That's my plug for today.
Hey, this is y'all space. Definitely get that information in the chat so I can get it out there to the community. I'll put it on the screen so people that watch our YouTube later, it'll be up on the screen. They can find it. But again, we have to get involved, community. This mental health is real. This wellness that we need, not only for our elders of the community, our young people, and we're going to keep this conversation going, because I think also we have to do an effort of getting this mental health in our schools for our young people, especially coming out of this pandemic. I know there's some social workers at the schools doing some things, but we really have to advocate for more mental health providers, our clinicians, to come into the schools and work with our young people, because we are dealing with a lot of violence in our community, and there's not enough grief counselors. These kids are dealing with a lot, and I'm hearing from some of these young people. I've had a couple of young people come on our show talking about the depression and anxiety and some of the things they dealt with, and we don't want to forget about our young people, as well as our elders in the community. But I think the schools is another place, and I think our employers have to do a better job of adding services, part of the workday, or a lot of times we have safety trainings and different things that's mandatory. And I'm starting to really believe that we need to push hard to make sure that mental health is part of that, mandatory training in the workplace.
Well, yeah, now you've just touched on my favorite thing, which is talking about training. Like I work as, like I mentioned before, I work as the manager of the Training Institute. So you did touch on a couple of things that like are my personal areas of like passion. So I'm really excited to talk more. And I really did want to, I can talk a little bit more about training in our schools and in our workplaces, but just to kind of circle back to something earlier we talked about. Like CW mentioned, we have a whole training on language matters, and not just to plug a training that I do, but just to talk about why I think it's completely revolutionary to have a conversation around language. And it's this idea that the way that we think influences the way that we speak and influences the way that we interact with our community. So really simple, when I was growing up, we used language like, oh, a homeless person. And then, as I got into housing justice and learning more about issues of housing, I learned different language, a person experiencing homelessness. And so that is someone might say like, oh, that's a really small shift in language. I don't really understand why you're putting all of that effort to mix your words around. But for me, what that is that I'm cognitively retraining my brain to see a person who has a family, a history, a life, hopes and dreams, challenges and strengths, and they're also experiencing a housing issue, and that's a temporary part of their life, but that's not who they are as a person. So when we talk about mental health, our language is so profoundly important, because you'll notice that, like, you know, we won't say like a mental health illness. I'll say a person who has mental health challenges, because I'm acknowledging that a person who is going through an experience of, or a difficult mental health experience, also is in real time coping, is in real, like, you know, I have my mental health challenges. I'm still here on this Zoom on a Sunday, you know, I'm doing two things at once. I'm still able to survive. I'm still able to be a thriving part of my community, even with my mental health challenge. So the language that we use around our mental health, I think, is a really great place to start. What language do I use? Oh, that, you know, do I use really stigmatizing language to describe other people with mental health challenges? Because if I do use that language, if I say like, oh yeah, that's schizo, that whatever, I won't want to associate myself with that group, because I'll use these terms that are really stigmatizing. So then I want to create distance, because, oh, I don't want to be like those people, you know what I mean? Like it really starts to, when we start to think about the language that we use to describe different types of people, does it create distance or does it bring people in? Like, I'm a person, you're a person. I currently am housed, you are currently unhoused, but that doesn't, like, we have more in common than we do like that is different. But so I can talk about language all day and I won't. But like when we talk about, wow, we want to bring these conversations, what words do we use when we have conversations around mental health? Is it affirming language? Is it strength-based? Does it acknowledge that people are whole and complex? Or is it only just talking about their challenge? And is it painting them with a really broad stroke in that way? So that was just my little soapbox on language.
No, I think that was very powerful. I mean, we need to hear that. The training is very important because we have to have the people who know how to get in the community and have the proper training to be effective. Because if we don't, it's just another deed that's not really being done. But with that being said, I see a couple of questions in here. Maybe we could just jump into a couple of community questions to see what they're talking about. One of the questions is from Kathleen Hicks. I'll put it up there on the screen. And she said, besides the obvious, what degree of difference is there between mental health and emotional well-being? Anybody could jump in and answer that.
Yeah, I'll say a few words. So, well, one of the things that comes to mind is that, and I think this goes along with what Sabrina was just talking about, that about language, like you know, a lot of time in our society, and I did this myself. It was like we would just talk about like, what's your diagnosis, you know, like it's kind of like a shorthand, you know, where people say, well, I'm schizophrenic or I'm bipolar or whatever it is, and you know, we're not doctors, but it feels a lot like there's this tendency in our society to use like this medical language to describe people, you know, like I've heard people like sort of making a joke like, oh, that was very bipolar, you know, like, you know, I'm not even sure what it's supposed to mean exactly, but what we do is we really say, well, what does that look like for you? You know, because I mean, somebody that's got, you know, anxiety or depression, I mean, some people sleep a lot, some don't sleep at all. Some people have no appetite, others overeat. I mean, it can be very, you know, there's a wide variety. And so like, we really try to meet the person where they're at and not talk about a diagnosis so much, but like, what's going on, you know, like what's going on for you right now? And to me, that reminds me of this question about mental health and emotional well-being. You know, I mean, I think they're related. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, these terms, I mean, I think they're only helpful if we think they're useful, you know, but I mean, emotional well-being to me is feeling like I'm able to function well, you know, whatever that means to me. You know, I mean, everybody's different, you know, that my mental health is not limiting me. And it, you know, in my experience, I mean, it really has. So I guess I kind of use them interchangeably, you know. And so I'm not committed, let's say, to language, to certain language around mental health or emotional well-being. I mean, I think they're connected, and mostly, I mean, we're interested in the person, you know, and that takes time, you know. I mean, time is money, right? And all that jazz, right? And really, I think what's, you know, I've used the warm line a little bit as an example. I mean, the warm line is a place where you can take some time and talk about things. You know, it's not like, all right, come on, you know, sit down. I got 5 minutes to talk to you, and then you're out of here. You know, so and we're trying to humanize. I'd say we're trying to humanize mental health challenges as well, and normalize, so that you know, there was a question earlier. I mean, maybe while I've got the soapbox right now about having Black and brown practitioners. I mean, I think that's huge. It's huge. I mean, I think there's been a thing where well, mental health is like a white person's illness, you know, or a white person's thing. I don't have time for that. You know, I don't understand it. And anyway, we're trying to, you know, the more we can all work together to demystify some of this, I think the better. And I think that's my 2 cents. So thank you.
Yeah, CW here again.
Go ahead, CW.
Yeah, I think when you ask that question, it's really, for me, it's really no separation. Emotional wellness is where I strive to be. Mental health challenges is what I live with. So to me, it's not only is they're interchangeable, it's that I live with a mental health diagnosis, but I strive to always be emotional wellness. That's what I strive toward. And on some days I'm great at it, and some days I'm not. But it all is blended together. It's something. It's part of who I am, but it's not all of who I am. And I think that's the thing we need to get away from, thinking it's got to be one or the other. It's actually, it's kind of a little bit of everything, and understanding how what works for you. Like I'm a peer connections counselor, so we have a thing called peer connections where we do one-on-ones. And so what we strive to do is like, where are you at? What do you need to get to your emotional wellness stage? And that's what we look at. And so the program's been really healthy for me because I'm a peer talking to another peer, and we're both talking about how do we get to our emotional wellness state. So for me, there's really no separation from that. It's just what state of emotional stability am I in, and how do we get there? So with me being a peer connections person, talking to another peer, they get to talk about their problems. I get to talk about my problems, and together we find our state of emotional wellness. So that's pretty much what I got to say about that, and I'm done.
I think that was phenomenal and well put. I think some of the people in the communities that we represent, it's mental health, because you're dealing with the violence in the community. You're dealing with a lot of this stuff. And how do you get to that emotional wellness side when you have all of this mental health and things that's impacted in the community? And I think, you know, you all hit on something that's very critical when we talk about the diagnosis when it comes to our doctors, because I think this is me. I believe the doctors, they jump too fast into the prescription, and I think what's happening from our clinicians and from some of the perspectives of our doctors, we're more going towards a drug-driven society. And I think some of these mental health issues, so we have like different things in the community. Some people are dealing with you know, psychotic things and different emotional issues. But I think I still think we're moving too fast to putting people to medications, and I think sometimes that also has a negative impact on a person's well-being, because some of the issues in some of our community, the depression and the anxiety, you know, comes from the lack of having resources, you know, and it's like this person might be, you know, in this bad mental space, like you said earlier, about they might be having issues with their job, you know, financial, paying the rent or the mortgage, things of that nature, that also puts those people in, you know, this mental state of unhealthiness. But is this person really driven for the medication? And I think what's happening is you go to these providers and they're just pushing drugs, and we're not really looking at the symptoms of what is really causing this mental health. And I wish we could get into that a little bit, because I think we could do a lot more with conversations like this, because we believe here at Both Sides of Conversation, the first part of healing is talking, right? Get it up out of you. And I think we have to go there first. But I think our society has become more of a drug pusher. And, you know, I even see it just for going to the doctor myself. Just, you know, you have a pain, you have an issue, they want to just prescribe you with something. They don't even check you no more. It's like, oh, we'll give you this. If that don't work, come back, we'll give you this. So I think with mental health is very critical, because sometimes we are dealing with people in two different spectrums. And the lack of services, and like you guys talked about the Medi-Cal and insurance, I think a lot of people in the community are turning to drugs to cope. Because I've talked to people on the street, and this is just being honest. This is directly from people that I've spoken to on the street, especially when it comes to hearing voices or different things, and they can't get. And I've talked to some people, and they can't get the services, so then they try to depend on the drugs to help remove whatever they're going through. But that's just something I wanted to put out there, and I want to hear from you all. But I think we're going into this drug pushing society from our prescribers, from our the doctors that are treating mental health. And I just want to hear from you all perspective. Is that the way we need to go? Is it too much of it? Am I far off? But I think some of the mental health and some of the communities that we represent, a lot of it is the economical and resources that actually put them into the depressed state or put them into the anxiety state, just dealing with the day-to-day living, especially when we live in communities where there's high violence. There's a lot of trauma. And not always is it the prescriptions that's needed. Like you said, sometimes it's the conversation and the coping and skills to deal with when those anxieties are high. So just want to hear from you all on that.
Yeah, this is Mark. So I think what we have to understand is a population health approach. Population health is actually just looking at all the socioeconomic contributions in an individual's life. So education, work, job, generational trauma, everything else that makes up an individual and how that affects one's life. Like you talked about, John, earlier, your mental health is affected by the stressors in paying the bills, rent, cell phone, whatever it is. So it's a very, we need to step back as a society, like you're saying, we're pushing medication and pills, but if we step back and say, okay, what is the root cause of all of that? We need to really look at community health and population health, and what certain things need to be changed as a system to kind of address the core issues of our society that result in the symptoms, which is mental health issues and all that stuff. So I think if we step back, we really do need to really look at everything and how they're all interconnected with one another.
Most definitely. I think that was a great point. Anybody else want to jump in, Peter or Sabrina?
Yeah, I also wanted to say I really appreciate that idea around rushing to a diagnosis and then rushing to be medicated. And I think when we're talking about some of the barriers that people experience in terms of receiving help or receiving support, that is such a huge one, especially connecting some of our earlier threads. We talked about stigma. So if I have a perception that people with depression, fill in the blank, I don't want to go to a doctor and give them a picture of what I've been going through for them to tell me, oh, you're a depressed person, here's your medication, and then leave. I think it can be really disempowering when we think about our medical system and how it does rush to a diagnosis and it does rush to medicate at times. And one thing that I think can be really empowering is this idea that we have that is you are the expert of your own experience. No one can tell you more about what you've been going through than you can. And when we're thinking about mental health support, I think a really big barrier to talking about it with a medical provider can be I don't want them to give me this diagnosis. I don't want them to tell me that I have to take medication. So I think this community education bit is really, really important, because when we talk about medication in in our agency, for some people, medication is the thing that saved their life, and it was something that they needed. It's some people have to take diabetes medication. I have to take this I have to take this medication. Like for some folks, it's life-saving. For some people, it doesn't work at all. And so allowing that both of those pathways are valid, when we talk about mental health support, we need providers and we need community spaces where we can talk about medication as being a valid form of recovery, but not the only valid form of recovery. And thinking of recovery as being a lifelong journey. I have a relationship with my physical health until I'm no longer on this earth, and I'm going to have a relationship with my mental health for the same amount of time. So there might be a season of my life where medication is really helpful, and there might be other seasons where I don't need that medication or it's not helpful. So I really just wanted to emphasize, like, you are the expert in your own lived experience. You could go to a doctor and they could give you a diagnosis, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to then enroll yourself in services that you don't feel are representative of you. I know folks who have gotten a diagnosis from a therapist, a psychiatrist, and they decided not to take medication, and they're still living really healthy, productive lives. So I think that that's something just to really emphasize. You don't have to get something brought down from the top, and then that's your reality now.
Wow, I think that was very beautifully put. I just know a couple parents had called and their kids were dealing with things and had some anxiety, couldn't sleep, and the first thing they got when they went to the doctor was Seroquel, and you know, sometimes it's like you said, just getting to what the problem is and trying to figure out a coping mechanism, because sometimes we know drugs get addictive and then now they can't function without the drug. And that's the one fear that I always have. Once you get on some of these medications, yes, it might clear you up or get you, moving, but then it's the part of the long-term addiction that could impact you. So CW, I see you had your hand up. Go ahead, brother. You got to unmute yourself, CW.
Yeah, for about 15 years, I was on medication, and the time that I was on it, I needed it. But then I've been off medication for going on 13 years now. There was a time when I got to a point where I felt I didn't need it, and I found alternative ways to deal with what I was going through. So I worked with my doctor to slowly step down from the medication. And I've been 13 years without medication, but I have other things now, like rap, like meditation, like eating healthy food. So there are a lot of things that I have used to replace that medication. But when I needed it, I needed it. But it's been 13 years that I've been off medication. I'm not saying I'll never be on it, but I take it for what it was then and for what it is now. And so it's just me understanding how that worked in my life. It really helped to stabilize me, but then it got to a point where I felt that it was not for me anymore, and I worked to get off of it, and I've been okay. So I'm never for a medication, and I'm never against medication. I'm like, you have to know your individual self and how that works with you. So for me, it's just finding what I needed when I needed it.
Wow, that's very well put, and I'm glad you explained it in that way, because as we answer these questions, we're going to kind of get into that awareness part. We have a lot of caregivers in our community. We have a lot of single parents. We have educators who are watching, and I think this part really ties into what you're talking about, being able to be aware, because a lot of times people can't advocate for themselves. And I think that part of the education we need to, as a community, have an understanding when people are at these levels and how to identify it and get them help. But it starts with these conversations. But the educational part of being aware is a big part of it. But Peter or Mark, did anybody want to jump in?
Well, I guess I would just add that I feel like the services that we're trying to provide are meant to meet the person where they're at, and that's I think it's Sabrina used the word empower. Like, we try to empower our the folks that we work with. We have a series of values that include empowerment. I think some folks come on, or some folks that we work with, they want us to tell them what to do. I mean, I've kind of been there myself, where it was like, just tell me what to do, and other folks don't want to hear much of what we have to say at all. in a way. It's kind of like they may feel like they've already tried everything and they've got all the answers already. But even with any of those, I mean, we just try to be there to help support the person while they make decisions about their own, their own mental health, and that includes medication. I mean, I do feel like there is this rush to medication. I know we've talked a little bit about substances and stuff, and I'll mention that I actually celebrated 26 years of sobriety yesterday, so that was my my sobriety anniversary. But that was great, and my mental health got better when I got clean and sober. But I ignored a lot about my mental health as well after I was clean and sober, and I kind of learned the hard way. And I've had that experience of hey, yeah. I mean, I remember once I went to see, I think it was at the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, which I think has been folded into Health Rate 360 now. This is years ago, and the psychiatrist there, like, he took one look at me and he said, "All right, I'm going to prescribe some antidepressants for you." And I'm like, I hardly even opened my mouth, and I thought, wow, okay. I mean, that was not, I don't know. In the medical model, which is what that would be part of, that's somebody really, it's a hierarchy, somebody really talking down to me and saying, all right, here's some medication, and not getting to know me or explain like the purpose of it really. So we say we're in the pure recovery model, and that's all about creating community. So I think that's what I'd like to add about all that. So thanks.
Hey, well, congratulations on your 23 years. That's phenomenal. A lot of people in that race, man. So just wanted to say thank you. And then I also wanted to say we had a psychotherapist. Her name is Leslie Robinson. She created these games about mental health, these flashcards to open up the conversation. We have another one of our community partners, a brother named James Harrison out of Oakland. He has these emotion cards as a way to open up these conversations. So people are putting some of the tools together, and I'll get that information out to the community because I think these games have been really, really impactful. I used them last week with some of the kids that we mentor in our youth facility. And just getting them to open up conversation to think differently is a part of this. And I think these are some of the tools that we can use to help impact some of the people in our community. So definitely there's some tools out there. But one of the questions from the community before the next person go was, does anxiety versus depression intersect? That was one question. If anybody want to answer that, but that was one of the questions that just came up.
That almost feels like the kind of question that I would hesitate to make an answer for because I think a doctor would probably be really quick to say, oh yeah, it's like this, and all I can talk about is my own experience, and really I feel personally like they do, but it might be different for somebody else. So for me, they do. I mean, I've had issues with both. And I think that's about all I want to say right now about it. So, thanks.
All right, thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on that conversation, or we could go another way?
No, I mean, just to jump in on what Peter's saying, it's a yes and no. So again, it really depends on the person. Some people can experience one or the other or both, and sometimes it can be kind of self-perpetuating to one another. So like Peter said, it really depends on the individual, and I think to a point earlier, it's always person-centered, right? So however, it doesn't. They aren't mutually exclusive, but at the same time, they don't always intersect.
Wow, phenomenal. About the awareness piece, Simone, did you have anything else? Because I kind of was running past you. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
I did, but they already answered it.
Okay. See, that's why it's important to have these conversations. We'll get there. But the awareness piece, I did mention earlier about the caregivers. There's a lot of foster parents. There's a lot of mentors, different things. Can you guys give a community some tips on like identifying when people might be in crisis or could be going through something? Because we did have a young person on our show, and he talked about his experience dealing with depression and how he isolated himself, and You know, he had his hood on and different things that he realized afterwards. But how do we kind of educate community and some of our parents what to look for? Maybe it is just sleeping too much, or I mean, ways that we could just kind of look into how do we see some of these things and kind of interact before it gets to that extreme point. So if you all have any tips or just things that community should be looking out for when we are engaging with our elders, our seniors, and our young people. I mean, I know during this pandemic, everybody, even me, the mental health, just being in the house, not being able to maneuver in the community, not being able to go to functions, it has definitely played a toll on me. And I mean, even just this past week, taking this vaccination shot, my anxiety just been high and not feeling well. So I've been at a great place dealing with that. But just want to hear from you all from a professional standpoint, like some of the ways that community, our parents, our caretakers, so we can help these people before they get into the crisis, or we can at least be aware and we know how to deal with the situation.
I could say a few words. I don't want to say too much, but I mean, I feel like I think the best thing a person can do is really like listen to those around them, and again, in a way, sort of do what we do in the sense like meet the person where they're at. I think it's hard. It's hard for parents where they feel like, well, how do I support my child? I think without getting upset, and really trying to treat a child with allowing them some autonomy also, right, and some independence. But and again, I mean, I think that resource we have, the Warm Line, is just really, really great. I mean, somebody that as there's a lot of parents that call in looking for that kind of support. I mean, what do I do? What do I look for? And I think what you mentioned, John, I mean, you've really asked some great questions. I mean, I think the thing about like, how do we keep somebody out of crisis? And the Warm Line is really all about that. I mean, the idea of a Warm Line in a way is that it's not a hotline. So that's one of our short definitions. We're trying to keep folks out of having to say go to the ER or call suicide prevention or like that. And I think just having it, like with a lot of this, it's having it on the radar, like I think we're saying, whereas, I mean, when I was growing up, mental health was not on the radar until somebody was in a crisis. And in my family, a crises would happen, I mean, but even then we'd be kind of like, well, we didn't know this is years and years ago. So I think having those conversations is so important, and trying to make it like a normal part of like, well, how's your day, and all that, and if we're all sitting in the house together, isolated, then how's this affecting your mental health? And maybe a young person isn't going to have those terms, but are you feeling sad? Or I know there's a lot, isolation, when kids are growing up, I mean, they really, really need all that, right? I mean, they need those connections. That's part of their development. So I see it all like it's all community related. I mean, we're creating a community of mental health wellness, to put it one way, and I think how families interact like that is really important. So,
thank you. That was very important. CW, go ahead. I see you with your hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I remember my grandfather. Whenever I would withdraw from my normal thing, because I used to love to go out and play baseball, or I go and play jacks, or whatever the thing was at that time. Whenever I stopped doing my normal routine, my grandfather would come and check on me. Like, oh, hey, you okay? What's going on? Why you ain't outside? Why you ain't doing, what you're doing? So I think just recognizing those routines that your kids or that your family members go through, and then if you start to see them slowly disconnect from whatever it is they're doing, maybe they're not texting anymore, maybe they're not on Facebook as much as they used to be. Just kind of like checking on them and just saying, hey, if you need to talk, I'm here. Just those 2 or 3 little words can really make a difference before they go into that depression or whatever's going on. Just letting people know that you're aware that something's going on and I'm here for you. Other than that, there's not really a whole lot to do except just be there and be aware of what's going on, and showing that compassion and that understanding to talk to people where they're at. And so I know a lot of times that's what kind of got me out of my funk is having my grandfather knock on my door and say, "Hey, I'm here. You need to talk," and then he would just walk away, and that would just bring me out of it. So just being aware of your family members, your friends, or whatever. If they're not doing something they normally do, you definitely need to just let them know you're there for them. I'm done.
Man, that's phenomenal. I'm glad you say that because now I have to rethink stuff. These kids play video games all day, so that's just normal. So I don't know getting outside versus playing the video game. So I have to be a little bit more aware just to ask questions because a lot of times I see my little cousins and they play the video games. So I'm like, that's just normal. That's what they do. But maybe getting outside, maybe there's something going on that's keeping them to the video games. And I know a lot of parents, because of what's going on in the community, tend to keep their kids in the house on those games to avoid some of the things that goes on in our community. But just hearing you say that, I still need to be checking on them and making sure that they okay as well. So that was a good feed. And then somebody in the community posted about the mental health board. So I'm going to put it back up there. Mark put it in there. They're looking for board of directors, people to get on there. So to community, there's the website. If you want to go there and be a part of the board and help drive some of the change and be a part of a phenomenal organization that's making a move for community, that's the information up there. Simone, did you have anything else or anybody else? We go turn to questions. We got 30 minutes left, so we're getting close. But I noticed there are a couple more things that we need to hone in on. But go ahead, Simone, if you have anything.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on social media when it comes to the children in the household with us being in a pandemic. Now, I'm in Arizona, so my children, they do go to school full time still. But what I had noticed when they were at home, I had to confiscate their phones. My children are very obedient. They listen, they do the things that they need to do. But what started happening was social media started to be a problem as they were being in the home more often than off to school. So I wanted to know, how crucial is it for us to say, you know what, to our children, let's take the phones away for about an hour or two. Let's sit at the dinner table and talk, or let's just sit on the balcony and talk. But how can we come up with different ways to not have our children on the video games or not having our children on social media as much because they're in the home all day?
That's a great question, Simone. The scientists and researchers have looked at the effects of the brain and social media, and it's like an addiction, right? Social media never closes. It's open 24/7. You get instant gratification using certain things there, like, share, whatever it is. Those tools, they create that effect within you to kind of immediately seek, more attention. And so social media is one of those things that have to be really well balanced with someone's life. There's a bunch of trainings out there called digital detoxing. I'm not an expert in children, but I would recommend people researching digital detox because that is a very important thing. A lot of kids become addicted to their phones. I mean, even adults like ourselves, we a bunch of us are constantly on our phones, just looking at different things, Facebook, Instagram, so, all these things. And there is a big balance around that. And I think it is very important that boundaries are set on when someone can use their cell phone or use their cell phone for things. As a person, I'm a very practical person, so I use my phone for very focused things. But for many other people, they can use it for other stuff. So I would really research digital detoxing and kind of creating a life balance, because everything's starting to become digital. Everybody has avatars or whatever. They have this digital personality who is not them in real life, and so I highly recommend learning about digital detoxing as a tool, as a method as well.
Wow, phenomenal. You are doing such a great job on this conversation today, giving the resources as we going through. I mean, sometimes it's hard to get the resources in there, but you guys are just pumping them out while we're going through it. Anybody else want to speak to that before I ask the next question? Because we're going to dive into something I think that's very important that we need to talk about. Go ahead, CW.
Yeah, I actually think I like what what you said, you actually answered your own question. Taking the time out to have family time. Don't matter if they're upset about it, don't care. That is so important to take 1 hour or a couple hours out where you're playing board games or you're doing something or you're going, whatever you choose to be. It's a physical thing. Maybe we're going to jog together today. Maybe we're going to just hang out and talk, whatever. I think that is so important because you have to at some point deplug. And I think it's so important to just deplug and talk. Even if they're upset, hey, be upset, but at least you'll be upset and disconnected for an hour. So I think you really answered your own question. It's just finding ways to make it fun. Gardening. You want to gardening or play with the pets or whatever it is that you can be creative and come up with. Maybe doing a project together. So I think it's so important. Like I said, I really think you answered your own question. Is just taking an hour out to just turn everything off. Even I do that. Sometimes I just turn everything off and just read a book and it's so satisfying. So I just wanted to thank you. Like I said, you answered your own question.
See, y'all helping me today. See, if y'all don't believe this stuff doesn't work, it works for me because now I need to detach, because running and doing the things that I do, my phone is ringing all day, all night, 12 o'clock. It's one thing about doing this work when you love the community, it's a great thing, but you become the community. So people are calling me all times and times of the night, day. So I'm going to have to take notes from you all and do digital detox and just send everybody to voicemail and cut off my phone for a little while. So
But I had to learn the hard way because I'm like, my children are really just, who are y'all? Like, what are we doing? They were all up. And once I took the cell phones away, once I was like, okay, I literally need to set time, not be busy. And even if we just go outside or even if we just go get ice cream, it really has changed for them to be, back to how they were before we were all secluded in this one area. So it's needed for sure.
definitely. Did anybody else want to say anything before we move on to the next questions? Sabrina, did you want to go?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say I really always appreciate when we have conversations with youth and with teens, especially around why we use the different tools that we use. Like as adults, many of us, we drink coffee every day because we like it because it helps us wake up. Like we recognize that it's a tool. If I drink 8 cups of coffee and I'm so wired that I can't think straight, like the tool is not being helpful. And social media is a tool. And if we're able to have conversations around what does social media do for you? Like if we have conversations with teens, like with the people in our life, like why do you like using Instagram? Like why do you like playing video games? I think it can give us so much more information around why we use the different tools that we use. And if we're noticing that, like, maybe there's a person who has maybe a difficult relationship with one of the tools that they use, like, they're on their phone all the time, that they're super disconnected. And I have a conversation with that person and they say like, oh, well, I really like Instagram because I really love like the images. Like I love the way that this influencer like takes photos. Now I know a lot more about the person I'm talking with. Like, do I want to take photos with them, and do we want to do a community walk and take some photos and make our own photo album? So when we have our conversations with teens, especially understanding that we use the same tools, like I use Instagram, like I'm not saying that like you have to get off your phone forever, but like let's have a conversation around why are you using these particular things? And especially when it gets to the point where you feel like it's causing some negative side effects, like they're really disconnected, they're not exercising enough, they seem like they're not having opportunities to socialize. Like if we see these things and we'd like to offer up, some other options, it's more helpful, I think, when we know the reasons why we are engaging in those tools. And so that way the conversation can be like, I'm interested to know more about what you like and what your passions are. And if I can find some other ways to support you and some other ways for you to express those passions outside of maybe just the one tool that we're really used to, which is like our phone.
Wow, that's phenomenal, and I believe too with the shortage, like Mark talked about earlier with the the workers, the clinicians, and different things, that there's a shortfall. People actually use social media to vent out. What I see a lot of times are people are going through crisis, and they actually are coming because they don't have the support or they have the means or the resources. They are coming out on social media, and that's something that we have to look at in the future. We know the FBI and different other agencies use it to hone down people who are making threats. And I'm trying to see, how do we make a model for mental health when we see people who are saying dark things or things that is a concern to the community, that we can reach out and give them support. So we have to use these digital platforms as well for help and support. Because I know a lot of people, they do take their frustrations and their angers out on social media, and definitely having the right amount of task force to be able to catch those people and reach out to them, I think is something that we also should look into in the future for community, because I think that's very important, because social media has been the new way of people venting and doing different things. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about this cancel culture that's kind of happening in America. I'm very, very afraid about this cancel culture because, again, when we start counseling people out from speaking up and saying what they need to say, I feel like we're going to have more repercussions of things, of different acts happening in the future. So I'm not in support of the cancel culture. I think there is some things that we need to do to help, work with people when it comes to certain things. But if we start taking people's voices away and being able to say the things that's affecting them, I just think we're going to have a long road in the future that's going to really impact this country. So that was one of the things that I wanted to touch on. And then before I jump into this question, I'm glad Peter put up the information about the warm hotline. But I want to hone in on the conversation, and I know this doesn't pertain to you all, but I'm just going to throw this out there because I've got a lot of emails and concerns from people in the community. And it's 311, okay? In San Francisco, I know it. I know different counties are using different non-emergency ways for help. I'm getting a lot of complaints from community saying, hey, when you call 311, there's nobody available. There's nobody calling you back. You might be in a crisis and you can't get support. They're asking you your insurance information, and people feel like they don't even get to really talk about what's going on because they feel like they're running their names and then they're not getting the help. 311 in San Francisco is a problem. I'm definitely reaching out to a couple of people about it. It's a problem. We have these systems in place that's supposed to help the community, but we also have to have leadership and management that's able to go back and find out when these services are not working or where are the flaws in the system to make sure that they also impact community. But I've got a lot of emails and text messages about 311, especially when parents are dealing with young kids who just experienced violence or shootings, different things of that nature. Getting support and services from 311 has been a problem. And I just wanted to since Peter put up the warm line 24/7, when we have these things in place and they don't work, how do we help? Because I know Matt Haney and the mayor did a phenomenal job of getting this mental health crisis team on board for people, but I still think we're missing the mark of the overall mental health services that's needed from the community, because those people are only dealing with the instant issue at hand and when somebody's in that full crisis mode. But I understand that we have a larger mental health crisis in our community that's being undealt with, unseen, and unheard. And yes, we need that immediate emergency response, but I think we have to do a better job of honing in how do we get these services to the community for a sustainable time long term. But with that being said, I just want you guys to talk about 311. Maybe you had experience. I talked to some people this morning. They say 311 sucks. It's not working. I've heard this multiple times. What do you guys think about this 311 or these hotlines or these different ways that we're supposed to be able to connect community with our services? Just want to hear from you all on that.
I'll go first. So I personally have never called 311, but I did have hear stories of the challenges of getting services there. Fortunately, there's other legislation coming through. I'm not sure if you've heard of 988. That's something that's coming up at the Assembly and State Assembly and State Senate, which designates 988 as possible replacement, and hopefully the replacement of the 311 system we have in San Francisco. But I can't comment specifically myself on the experience of 311, but I do and have heard about the issues and challenges about actually getting services in a timely manner. And I think that's the big issue, is a timely manner and even response from anybody there.
Yeah, I think that's been a lot of it, the timely manner and actually having somebody, because when they were selling this 311 thing, it was supposed to be the alternate to 911. And you're supposed to got an operator. And I think it's kind of, I don't know if it's funding or whatever, but it seems to not be impacting the community in a positive way that it's supposed to. So again, instead of getting a 311 call, now people are dialing 911, impacting our emergency response system. And I just think it's something that we have to look at, because we have to be able to, when people are coming to this mid crisis and before they in full crisis, we have to have somebody to answer the phone, give them the services or the help, and follow up is a big problem. And that's just something we're going to be fighting a long time here around the city, different organizations. Follow up has just been a problem. And I'm hoping that, together collectively, as we work to help change the narrative, not only in our community, but with our elected officials in City Hall, and we start working to make these changes, because it has to happen if we really want to have a true impact and a positive experience here in San Francisco and throughout the communities. I mean, these services are across the nation, and we have to make sure that these systems that are in place really impact the community positive so they can have a great experience. But Sabrina, did you want to say anything?
No,
no. Okay, Peter, did you want to jump in there, Peter?
Yeah, you know that we have police commission meetings that the public can go to. And also, every district has a police station that actually have public meetings open to the public. And so going down there and letting them know constantly, like every time there's a meeting, going there and letting them know, find out where your precinct is, talk to the police, say, hey, when is the next police meeting? It's probably on Zoom, it's probably not physical anymore. But being there and saying, hey, 311 doesn't work. We really need, if you're going to implement this, we don't want you to give us a new number if it's going to be the same old thing. So going to those places or Zooming to police commission meetings and letting them know that what they have is not working and it needs to change. People really need that help. If they can't call 911, they got to call something. So, making them accountable. I think the more people that show up to make them accountable, to make sure they follow through. And that's what's really important. A lot of times people don't know about that these police have meetings where you can go in there and voice your opinion. So that's something definitely to check out.
Yeah, I'm glad you. I'm glad you brought that up. That's very important. And I'm working with Chief Scott. We're going to start having some of that stuff upcoming in the future, because that is a big problem. And one of the issues that I already told Chief Scott was, these police meetings that's happening, they are really happening with our community organizations, a lot of the nonprofits and some of the community leaders, and it's not happening for the community. So me and him is working together to use both sides of the conversation as another hub of communication to the community. We got a lot of things that we want to do, especially because there's been a lot of change in our San Francisco Police Department, making sure that each captain from the different divisions come on and introduce themselves to the community, and then topics like you just said, having these conversations when the meetings are, and some of these different direct contact phone numbers to call to help in the community is going to be very important. So we're going to keep working to put that together. That's something that we're going to be putting together here in the future. And Chief Scott's been pretty open and okay about the conversation that needs to happen with community, because typically what happens is the full community is not involved. And I hear it all the time. Hey, I can't get the links to the Zoom meetings. I don't know what's going on. Only the community organizations are going, the executive directors, and sometimes some of the people that's part of the organization, and the actual community voice is not being heard. So we're hoping to use this platform as a way for community to have live engagement and make sure that the questions that the community have is getting answered. And again, we will keep it respectful and professional. But again, we have to have these conversations. And I know a lot of times in our communities, when it comes to police, they don't want to have these conversations, but we will have them because it's needed. The only way we could change some of this is they have to hear from us. We have to have a conversation, and we need to know where the flaws and the issues are so that we can really impact the community. So thanks for putting that out there. That's something that we're working on in the future here. Peter, did you want to jump in here, Peter?
Just a little bit. This topic really reminds me. We have a conference that's a series of events as well, called Redefining Crazy. It's the system, not the people. And 311 is one example. I think what we're trying to point out with this event, and we have monthly events, and then we're going to have a virtual conference later in the year, but that really the system's broken, and it doesn't prioritize people. It's kind of run. It's run. It's kind of it's out of control in a lot of ways. I mean, I think we're trying to address that. Like you mentioned a few things. I mean, I think Supervisor Haney and Supervisor Ronan have some great ideas, but it's not just about fixing 311. I think it's about the whole thing. You know, like having something. I know Mark likes to talk about more comprehensive services. You know, a lot of folks. We were talking earlier about about short-term services. You know, and it's like one person or like one area, they don't know what the other one's doing, you know, like, all right, go over here and then go over there. And you know, we need more comprehensive services where really where it's person, you know, we talk about person-centered language. I mean, we need person-centered treatment, you know? So I'll put that information in the chat box too. I mean, redefining crazy, it's a very broad topic, and crazy is one of those words. It's very stigmatizing that's why we talk about redefining it, right? I mean, it gets used kind of like, oh, that was so crazy last night, man, you know, and also just it's very stigmatizing with people, you know, like, I mean, I was called crazy, you know, and it's not a compliment. So, you know, I think it's all about us and them, and we're trying to create. I mean, we're trying to separate those barriers, you know, so that it's a community that serves everyone, not just a select few.
Definitely very powerful, but yeah, definitely our elected officials. There is some reform and change that needs to happen because we do have a lot of our systems that's in place that are failing the community. And you know, that's the role of leadership. And I always say this, and I continue to say it. Part of being a leader is when things are not so good, you have to step up and take the accountability. A lot of times, you know, everybody shows up for the great things when something's good going on in a district or something's going great, you know, at the work site. But we also have to stand up when things are not working right and put the right people together to fix them. And I know that they're trying to do some of that, but we definitely have to do a little bit more. And I'm gonna keep pushing all of our elected officials, our supervisors. I work with them, a lot of them. I talk to them, but that's part of being a leader. You have to be able to take the knocks and the things that's not going so well as well, and everything is good. And that's just about change, and that's a mentality shift. And it's not a knock on the person. We can't save everything and every problem, but I think leadership. People in the community are looking for leaders to step up when things aren't so great, because we know they step up when things are going fine, or you know, something they're put in a position that's moving. But we also need them to step up when things aren't so great and take the accountability and make sure that those who are working behind the scenes get those issues fixed, especially when we're dealing with systems that impact people with mental health and things of that nature. Very important. But we're going to keep on reaching out to them and giving them the feedback and making sure that they understand these needs are needed, and we need them advocating and fighting for the services for you all, especially when it comes to the pay equity, and definitely giving the capacity services for all of our communities. So with that being said, we have 10 minutes left. I knew this 2 hours would go fast. I know you all been holding in there patiently. We are at a 10-minute mark. So what I want to do is, you know, before we end the show, we typically ask everybody to give some leaving words to the community, and everybody will check out, and then we'll definitely go ahead and start wrapping up the show. But I want to give everybody an opportunity to just leave something back to the community, any words of wisdom or anything that you want to give out, and we can just go in order however you all want to start. I guess they want me to pick. All right, so we'll start with Mark. We'll go with Mark first.
Thanks, Simone and John, for having us on. It's a great opportunity for us to kind of really talk about mental health. I appreciate the conversation. You know, it's very broad, diverse, and I appreciate the audience for kind of chiming in. You know, mental health is a topic that, you know, our communities don't ever really talk about. I'm talking about the BIPOC communities, and it's time for us to really engage it and talk about it. So remember, May is Mental Health Month. You know, mental health is not only about people who's living with mental health conditions, but also yourself. So make sure you practice self-care. take care of yourself and everybody around you, and that's the only way to take care of everybody else around you. So again, thank you for having us on. And again, my final plug: if you want to join the Mental Health Association's board of directors, visit our website, mentalhealthsf.org.
All right, I'll get that up. CW, you want to go ahead? I'll get that up again. Go ahead, CW. You got to unmute yourself. You're having a John Henry moment right now. Don't feel bad.
Love it. Yeah, I just wanted to say, just thank you for letting us be part of this, and that as a person that does the POC group, we're really trying to grow our group, people of color group, our BIPOC community. We have a lot of things to say. We have a lot of issues to face, and we want to face them together as a community. So you go to mentalhealthsf.org and look up our POC group, and should be able to connect. It's 10:30 every Monday. In fact, next tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning. Please join us. You can definitely contact Peter. I think Peter has the connection. So just want to say thank you for letting us be part of this. And the BIPOC community, we're talking about making serious changes. And if you're talking about making changes, come check us out tomorrow, Monday, 10:30. All right.
All right, real talk. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm going to try to jump on tomorrow just to support because I think it's important. These conversations have to continue to keep help happening in our community to really make change. And that's one of the reasons why we started both sides of the conversation, because we believe that through communication, a healing process truly begins. And these conversations that we all had today is very powerful and impactful to the community. So with that being said, go ahead, Peter, give out your last closing words to the community, and I'll put your email up there.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks, John and Simone. I'm really glad that we could do this, and I hope that we going forward we can keep working together. I mean, it's really an ongoing project, and I think this conversation can be very, very helpful for the community to get more information, and we're always looking for opportunities to be able to talk about the work that we do. And I believe in the work that we do. It helps save my life, and I feel like I'm pretty passionate about it. So I welcome this chance, and thanks, John, and thanks, Simone, for giving us this opportunity. So I'll pass it along, I guess, to Sabrina. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Peter. And these conversations are going to keep happening, and you all are now part of the Both Sides of Conversation family. Anytime we have any topics that you all feel that you could bring something to it, please join as a panelist on our website, because we need all of the great minds to come together with these think tanks on these conversations. And yeah, anything we can do to support what you all doing, and we'll definitely be working together. This conversation about mental health is not stopping no time soon. So I'm looking forward to more conversations. Sabrina.
Yeah, well, I mean, echoing what everyone else said, thank you so much, John and Simone, for having us. And when I think about like a final word, the one thing I always try to leave folks with is like I learned something from Sean Ginwright, who focuses like on a healing centered engagement perspective. And one of the most profound things that I heard him say was that like one of the most damaging things of racism and marginalization isn't the removal of services or the lack of access. It's the removal of our imaginations. So when we don't have the opportunity to imagine new systems, and we're constantly looking to see, oh, what's broken, what's in the world, what do we have here? Let's see what we can kind of put together. I think we'll always be working with what is instead of what can be. So when we're talking about having these conversations and reimagining systems, we can also use our imagination to boldly envision something that isn't here. What is beyond 311? What is beyond police? What is beyond these systems that we have that are not working? And when we can use our ability to imagine new systems that boldly center our healing, I think we can really accomplish really incredible things. And I mean, of course, I have to so that's like my high level ending thought, but also like putting money where the services are. And I really feel like the people who work for our organization, we work here because we really believe in it, and we offer a lot of our services for free. And of course, to do that, we really rely on donations. So if you've appreciated what we've been what we've been talking about and appreciate the services that we offer in our community, like please, go to our website and donate. And that helps to fund peer workers, that helps to fund free mental health services. So we really, of course, want to emphasize that. And I'm excited to continue to loop in with both sides of the conversation. And I'm really grateful that we were able to talk today.
Yes, thank you very much. We really appreciate all you coming on today, and I'm still advocating for mobile wellness. I want some trucks to pull up in the community, and people could walk into the truck and get some one-on-one counseling. So that's something that I'm advocating for. I think we need to have some mobile help. I know we're doing a lot of tele health when it comes to mental health, but I know our people sometimes getting to the locations is a challenge, and I think we need to get some nice vehicles and some bus type cargo to pull up and have some individual walls, and we can do some mental health in the community as well. I think that's powerful. But with that said, thank you all. Simone, did you want to give your last thoughts of the day?
My last thought of the day basically is, if there's anyone out there and you're feeling like you need an outlet or you need to contact, the first step is just reaching out and getting the resource. If you don't know, as John Henry and everyone has explained before, they've put the information in the text box below. Start there. So my words of the day is just reach out and ask, and then from there you can continue to build to where it is that you need to go.
All right, phenomenal, phenomenal. With that being said, I want to say my last words is mental health is wealth. We all have to take care of ourselves, like Brother Johnson said earlier. It's all the way complete thing. Outside physically, inside mentally. It's a lot of work that we have to continue to do. We know there's a big gap. Some of the things that we pulled out of this conversation, it seems like in every conversation, we know there's a financial equity gap that we have to work on fixing. We have to also meet people where they at. I heard it several times said today. When you're dealing with people in the community, have a little bit of humility, have a little compassion when people are in crisis or going through things. Don't just look at them and say, like Peter said, they're crazy or different things like that. Just understand people have different challenges that they're dealing with, and as community, we need to support them and be aware. And I hope this conversation actually gave people another way to think about what's going on when it comes to mental health. So we just want to continue to support those in need as they're in the community. We all have to do our part. I keep telling everybody we have a motion, and it's a big campaign and a movement in San Francisco and across this country about solidarity. And I believe solidarity happens 365 days a year for all communities, for all issues. And this is another community solidarity thing when it comes to mental health, coming together to make sure our young people and our elders in the community get the support that's needed. And we are aware when people are in crisis so that we can help them get the services and the things that they all need. We have a 24/7 hotline here that Peter's gracefully put up for everybody. If you're feeling some kind of way, if you need someone to talk to, there's a number that you can reach out to. And sometimes just having that person that can listen to you is very important. So I hope you all use the information. If you missed some of the information today, please go back to our YouTube. We'll have it up there where you could go back and follow through and see some of the information that was given out. They gave out some phenomenal resources for community. And just want to thank you all again for coming in and having this difficult conversation, because, here at both sides of the conversation, we want to have these conversations about stigmas and the taboo conversation that most people don't want to have. And today was another important one. And we're going to continue this conversation moving forward because it's very important. It's impacting a lot of our people in the community, especially coming out of this pandemic. We're not going to stop here. We're going to keep these conversations moving forward. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start closing out this Tuesday. Coming up, we have another segment of Hidden Gems. Everyone knows, or if you don't know, you watch it every Tuesday at 7 p.m. We have a segment called Hidden Gems where we highlight Black and brown businesses, and we highlight community leaders in the community that do things to positively impact our community, like the people we have today. You'll see people like them coming on, and we highlight them, and we give them their flowers and their homage while they're here so that they know that they're appreciated appreciate it because a lot of times these workers that we have here are underpaid, underserved. They don't always get the acknowledgement. And our job here at both sides of the conversation is to give them flowers, give them the homage, and give them the praise that they need. And as community, we can say thank you for the work you all do to support us. That's what our Hidden Gem segment is about. And then this Thursday, we'll have another educational presentation getting put on. We're going to be talking about life insurance. I know last week our guest that was supposed to be on lost a family member, and we had to replay a previous segment. But she'll be coming back. She'll be booking to talk more about financial literacy. And then next Sunday, it is Mother's Day, and we're going to probably, by the end of the week, let everybody know if we're going to have a show for Sunday. It is Mother's Day, and we want to respect all of the mothers. I'll be out at a couple of the community Mother Day events, but it is Mother's Day, and we're going to see how many of our panelists sign up for the rest of this week. But it is Mother's Day, and we want to respect all of our mothers in the community and let their families celebrate them for what all they do for family and for community. So we'll let you all know before the end of the week when we'll be having a show next Sunday. We'll probably play a previous show if we don't, but salute to all of the mothers for Mother's Day coming up. Very, very powerful day for the women in our community that do so much to impact us all. Just want to celebrate them, and we'll be out in the community. Both sides of the conversation team will be at a number of community events that's going to celebrate our mothers, and we'll get that footage out to community soon. So that's what's happening for Sunday. So with that being said, thank you all for joining us. Please go to our website. I just want to let the community know we did add the Google Translate to our website. So now next to the donate button, when you go onto our home screen, you could click whatever on the Google Translate button, and you could turn our whole website into the language that you speak. A lot of community reached out to us, and they were saying that was one of the challenges. So we put the Google Translate up. So now you can go to our website, and everything on our website will translate into the language that you prefer, so that you could be a part of this, the conversations. We're still working with our YouTube. We're trying to find out how to get the language added to YouTube, because I know a lot from our Latin community spoke out about making sure that they can see what's going on here and be a part of the show. So we'll get that coming to you soon. Our team's working on that, but just want to thank our website designer and some of our team people for making sure that happened. And thank you to our Latinx community for reaching out, letting us know that was something that we needed to change so that other people from other communities could be involved with the conversation. So we appreciate you all. Thank you, Simone, for coming on. I know this was your first day. Happy to have you back. You've been one of our hidden gems, Miss Arizona. The privilege to come to both sides of the conversation and help us with this hosting. Just happy to have you here, and moving forward, a lot of phenomenal conversations are going to be coming. But thank you all for watching today. We'll see you this Tuesday. Have a blessed weekend. Be safe out there and take care of yourself from a mental health perspective. See you all soon.